welcome back to Wednesday Night Live. It's Wednesday, June the 11th, 2014, and we're coming to you from Pocatello, Idaho, in the beautiful Portneuf Valley, gateway to the great Northwest. And we're glad you joined us. We have a packed evening tonight, a lot of things to discuss. And as you may recall, we're probably going to continue, maybe close off the discussion on how we got to this point of disaster for our city. But before we do that, may I remind you, as I do every week at this time, about Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 478-HOPE. If you're outside of Pocatello, outside of the state of Idaho, you may not know that the entire state has one area code, 208. And I would ask you to call 478-HOPE and see what you can do to save a life. Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center is the absolute opposite of Planned Parenthood. In other words, Compassion and Hope is about life, compassion, and hope. They don't get millions of dollars of your taxpayer money from the government to support them. They need your help. And I would ask you to call them, see what you can do to help them financially or otherwise. Compassion and Hope Pregnancy Center, 208-478-HOPE. And I would remind you also that they have their annual Walk for Life that's coming up, that this is their major fundraiser for the season. And so let me just read to you from their flyer, and we'll show you the poster we have here. This is to remind you, now this is this weekend, third annual Walk for Life free fundraising event, June 14th, 2014, 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., Raymond Park, free to attend. Now the entertainment will be the MC will be C.J. Morrison from KMGI Rock 102, live music by Dave Reichelt, John Young and Band, free food, hot dogs, cotton candy, and slushies. Obviously, this is a family-friendly event. Bouncy house, coloring contest, face painting games, and more. Dad, stay out of the bouncy house, but you can get the face paint. Something for everyone. There are raffle tickets available. They're only $5 each, or $5 for $20. And you can pick up your raffle tickets and walkathon donation sheets at Nitro Graphics, corner of Clark and 4th, and Double Shot, corner of Jefferson and Elm, or corner of Pole Line and Yellowstone, and on the day of the walk. And if you haven't been to a Double Shot coffee place, you're missing a treat. They have, Starbucks has nothing that they can compare to Double Shot, and they're reasonable, they're family friendly, and great coffee. Now, you may win a 48-inch JVC flat screen TV with Roku. I finally found out what a Roku is. You probably already knew it. I'm not technologically advanced, but I have a Roku. Haven't hooked it up yet. I guess I have to have something done with my cable service. But anyway, you could get a 48-inch JVC flat screen TV with Roku, a $500 value, and that's sponsored by MBCJ Old Faithful Landscaping and Sprinkler. So if you're going to have some landscaping done and get some sprinklers, you might consider MBCJ Old Faithful Landscaping. Also, there will be a Kindle Fire HDX 7-inch tablet with quad-core processor with keyboard and case, a $350 value. And this is sponsored by 21st Century Remodeling. So if you have some remodeling needs, you may consider 21st Century and consider what they're doing to help life. And a mountain bike, a Chaparral 21-speed, $250 value. It doesn't say who donated that, but boy, I'd like to have that myself. So that's the third annual Walk for Life, and that is June 14th, 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. at Raymond Park. And I would urge you to attend. It is a family event, and you'll be happy. The kids can have fun. I was there last year for the second annual walkathon and had a great time. Great crowd and lots of neat things. I think you're going to enjoy it. Now, as I have been telling you for some time, we're going to show you some film clips of things to remind you or to bring you up to date on things that we've been talking about. But I'm going to read this to you again, as I have so many times before. It comes from this book, The Homosexualization of America, by homosexual activist Dennis Altman. And I'm going to keep saying this until the light goes on. Now, with most of you, the light probably has gone on. But listen carefully to what I say. The greatest single victory of the gay movement over the past decade has been to shift the debate from behavior to identity, thus forcing opponents into a position where they can be seen as attacking the civil rights of homosexual citizens. And that's from this book, The Homosexualization of America by homosexual activist Dennis Altman. I urge you to buy this book. Get it on the secondary market. I believe my wife paid a penny for this plus shipping and handling. The information is worth far more than a penny because you need to know this. This is life or death, not just for our city, but for our nation, for the world. And I know that's really being over the top, melodramatic perhaps, but the homosexualization of America, you can't learn enough about what's happening to us and how it's happened. Now, why is all this important? I mean, we've got really important stuff here. Here's the National Enquirer, and we know that Chevy Chase is now 300 pounds and he had a heart attack. That's important stuff. I mean, you know, Chevy Chase used to make us all giggle at some of his silly stuff. And in this issue, this is what is the date on this? May the 26th. It's a little bit outdated. But in this issue, you find out the lost diaries reveal the real reason O.J. killed Nicole. After 20 years, the shocking truth. We're talking about important stuff here. The breaking news, George Clooney cheating bombshell. George Clooney cheating on his fiancée, Amel Almadine. Yeah, Almadine. She's an actress, pretty lady. Who's the other woman in the love triangle? This is earth-shattering stuff, folks. This is the stuff that, you know, CSI star is gay, cradle robber. Gerald's dating college jock, half his age. Now that's it. And there's a lovely picture of these two fellows kissing. Cradle robber. Well, that's interesting. They used to just talk about old men with little girls or young ladies about that. Now it's come full cycle. Hugh Jackman has a deadly cancer. Well, you know, a lot of people have facial cancers. Culkin's killer buddy. Home Alone star befriends freed monster who chopped up his roommate. See, there's important stuff in here. So why would you be interested in the homosexualization of America? I mean, half the television programs now make homosexuals just benign people, you know. They've got one program where there's a couple of guys that are, I don't know if it's committed a relationship or quote unquote married because I haven't watched pieces of it enough to realize I was on the wrong channel. Why do we talk about that? Well, part of it has to do with this ordinance that we got here in our city that got jammed upon us a year ago this month. I can't say it's a year ago today, but it's a year ago this month, and we're gonna talk about the rest of how that came to be. But before we do that, let's kind of bring you up to date on some other things. This is from Fox News. This is June the 3rd, so this is a little more than a week ago. And one of the things that I want to remind you is when this ordinance was foisted upon us, inflicted upon us, Gary Moore didn't like that term. Gary, I'm sorry, it is an infliction upon some of us. We were told, among other things, that, you know, the homosexual community, the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual community, and those are interesting terms. Interesting terms. These are terms that some people use to identify themselves. What do you do for a living? Well, I'm bisexual. What about you? Oh, well, I don't know, I'm just a baker. Oh, I hope you're baking wedding cakes or I'll take care of you. In fact, that's what this is all about. Fox News, June 3rd, 2014. Baker forced to make gay wedding cakes, undergo sensitivity training after losing lawsuit. This is by a fellow named Todd Starnes. A family-owned bakery has been ordered to make wedding cakes for gay couples and guarantee that its staff be given comprehensive training on Colorado's anti-discrimination laws after the state's Civil Rights Commission determined the Christian baker violated the law by refusing to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. Could it happen here? Absolutely. Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood, Colorado, was directed to change his store policies immediately and force his staff to attend the training sessions. For the next 2 years, Phillips will also be required to submit quarterly reports to the commission to confirm that he has not turned away customers based on their sexual orientation. Think about this is Nazi Germany, folks. This is not equal rights. This is not civil rights. This is Nazi Germany. Think of it as reverse conversion therapy or straight man's rehab, so the state can mandate diversity through conformity. See, if the homosexuals can't get you to accept their lifestyle and that you won't give them your approbation, well, then they will make you do it. And they will make you do it under penalty of law, such as the Non-Discrimination Ordinance, which we are still trying to fight, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The plight of Jack Phillips and his family is something I write about in my new book, Godless America. Godless America. His story of religious persecution is one of many that I document. Nicole Martin, an attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom, called the ruling Orwellian and said they are considering an appeal. They are turning people of faith into religious refugees, Martin told me. If this the society that we want, is this the society that we want to live in, where people of faith are driven out of business? Well, apparently that's the society homosexuals want us to live in. By golly, if you won't bake them a cake, then they'll ruin you. and you deserve it. Martin said it was truly frightening that Phillips will be forced to submit quarterly reports to the government disclosing whether he turned away any wedding cake business. There will be some reporting requirements so that Jack can demonstrate that he doesn't exercise his belief system anymore, that he has divested himself of his beliefs, she said. Now those of you in whatever faith you have, if it is a Christian faith or espouses a Christian ethic, you may find that a little bit detestable, that you would be told, sorry, but no, don't even say sorry. You will stop believing what you believe, and you will accept our will, for we are LGBTQ. He will also be required to create new policies and procedures for his staff. We consider this reporting to be aimed at rehabilitating Jack so that he has the right thoughts, Martin said. That's offensive to everything America stands for. Phillips, who is celebrating his 40th year in business this week, told me he's not going to create any new policies. My old ones are pretty adequate as far as I'm concerned, he said. I don't plan on giving up my faith and changing because of that. The controversy started in 2012 when a gay couple asked Phillips to make their wedding cake. Phillips politely declined, saying he could not make a cake promoting a same-sex ceremony because of his faith. He offered to make them any other bake item they wanted. Charlie Craig and David Mullins filed a complaint with the Colorado Civil Rights Commission, alleging they were discriminated against because of their sexual orientation. For the record, same-sex marriage is against the law in Colorado. The commission affirmed a civil court's ruling that the bakery cannot discriminate against persons in a public place based on sexual orientation. You can have your beliefs, but you can't hurt other people at the same time, Commission Chairwoman Katina Banks told the Denver Channel. ACLU attorney Amanda Goad, who heads up the organization's LGBT group, heralded the ruling. Religious freedom is undoubtedly an important American value, but so is the right to be treated equally under the law, free from discrimination, she said in a statement. No, my dear, religious freedom is a constitutional right. Everyone is free to believe what they want, but businesses like Masterpiece Cake Shop cannot treat some customers differently than others based on who they are as people, Goad added. David Mullins, one of the two men who brought the lawsuit against Phillips, was thrilled with the ruling. What should have been a happy day for us turned into a humiliating and dehumanizing experience because of the way we were treated, he said in an ACLU statement. Who knew buttercream frosting could cause such angst? No one should ever have to walk into a store and wonder if they will be turned away just because of who they are, Mullins added. But that's not what Phillips did. He was more than willing to make them a cupcake. Jack doesn't turn people away, Martin told me. There are just some events that he won't lend his artistry to. The ACLU accused Masterpiece Cake Shop of considering itself above the law. Good old ACLU defending the little guy. Unless the little guy's straight, well, then you got a problem. Everyone who shops in our stores and conducts business in our state should be treated with equality and dignity, Attorney Paula Greisen said in an ACLU of Colorado statement. That's what this ruling is about. No, ma'am, it was not. That ruling was about bullying Christians. There's a collision between religious liberty and the gay rights movement, Martin told me. This collision is coming to the forefront almost every day. Somebody is losing their liberty, their job, or both. But thank goodness for someone like Jack Phillips, who refused to capitulate to the government's demands. Mind you, this is the government telling this man what he can bake, or what he cannot do if he doesn't bake. My God is bigger than any bullies they've got, he said. I don't worry about it. I honor my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and be true to what he wants me to do. And the Civil Rights Commission is going to have a mighty hard time trying to rehabilitate Phillips and his staff. My 87-year-old mom works there, and she says she's not being rehabilitated, he said. Martin said the Alliance Defending Freedom will continue to stand with Jack against overreach and tyranny by the state. Jack has gone out on a limb and taken this stand and not capitulated to the government's demands, she said. That speaks volumes about him. And should the highest court in the land force Jack to do the bidding of homosexuals? That's their civil disobedience, Phillips told me. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to give up my faith. Too many people have died for this faith to give it up that easily. Meanwhile, the bullying tactics of the militant gay rights community have not hampered the bakery's bottom line. They've gotten so much business from the sale of cookies and brownies, they're temporarily stopped making wedding cakes. Obey Christ rather than worry about what man can do to you, Phillips said. There you have it, folks. In Colorado, you can't have your cake and religious beliefs too. Now, that was a little long, but it's important to perhaps remind you of what it is that the Vote Yes Pocatello folks are fighting about. There are people in this community, well-meaning I'm sure, some of them, not all of them. Some of them are just like these two characters that were thrilled with this decision. There are people in this community that feel that Vote Yes Pocatello is wasting taxpayer money by challenging, asking for a recount on the recent election where only 80 votes separated repeal from continuance with the ordinance. Is it a waste of taxpayers' money to bring a community together under one law that's equal for everybody? I think not. Thursday, June 5, 2014. This is from your letters in the ISJ. If you viewed the 2012 Democratic Congressional Convention in Florida, you would have been witness to their efforts to remove God from their platform. 3 times the audience voted overwhelmingly to remove God. Democrats, please, before you continue to promote this godless law, study what same-sex marriage has done to Massachusetts. The state has been taken over by homosexual activists in every walk of life and especially schools. Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley tells homosexual activists she'll help mold our laws, our opinions, and our culture for the LGBT community. Gay Massachusetts State Representative Carl Sciortino, a Democrat from Medford, is the national homosexual movement's point man in the legislature and is helping in leading the charge. School libraries across the state from elementary to high school have attempted to normalize LGBT behavior and lifestyle in the minds of kids with graphic materials, some quite explicit and bordering on pornographic. Schools promote gay pride days, special assemblies, rallies, and all LGBT-related activities as normal. Activists attack traditional churches and the Catholic Church. STDs, that's sexually transmitted diseases, have increased considerably since same-sex marriage became legal, and Massachusetts increased budgets by $30 to $35 million, much more than any other viral disease. What have you same-sex promoters done? That's from Mary Mortensen in St. George, Utah. Well said, Mary. All right. Now, this is a little different from that, and yet it kind of gets to the same thing. This is remember Alan West, retired Army colonel, in my mind a hero, and certainly a stand-up guy, the kind of guy that most of us who have served in the military would be proud to follow into combat or wherever else he asked us to go. Alan B. West has his own website, alanbwest.com. He is a former congressman from Florida, and as I said, a retired Army colonel, a very stand-up guy, highly decorated, solid American. He says, police state, impeach Obama activist targeted by Michigan police chief. This is by Alan West. What type of country, and this is not different from what we're talking about, the LGBTQ forcing us to live in what is becoming a Nazi state. And we are very, very quickly, very rapidly approaching a fascist state where the government controls everything. And now the thought police are going to control your thoughts, or you will be rehabilitated, and you better get on the train. It's going to leave the town without you, and you will be rehabilitated. What type of country are we becoming when freedom of expression becomes a target of those legally granted with governmental power? Such is the question I ponder, having just finished a visit with the Thomas More Law Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, reviewing some of their current cases. I found this one particularly interesting. You may be aware of the Impeach Obama overpass movement. Quite certain they may be getting lots more honks these days. It seems that one chief of police, Timothy Kellerman of Campbell, Wisconsin, not only doesn't appreciate this exercise of the First Amendment, he's making it personal. Enter Mr. Greg Luce, a devout Catholic and a member of the Tea Party. He opposes President Obama on several issues, including the president's stance on abortion. Luce was targeted for retaliation while he spoke out against a city ordinance which prohibits citizens from displaying the American flag, banners, and wearing T-shirts that call for the impeachment of President Obama on a pedestrian highway overpass managed by the city. Silly me, I thought overpasses were part of the public square, and since the taxpayer funds the overpass, I'm assuming in this case their freedom to assemble and express themselves in petitioning their government for redress of grievances was their right. Perhaps in the fundamentally transformed America of Barack Hussein Obama, I may be wrong. And I just have to ask, if there were individuals gathered on the overpass burning the American flag, even without an open burn permit, would there be any such hoopla? Oh yeah, for many that's acceptable freedom of expression. Not for me, of course. Well, apparently old Chief Kellerman didn't appreciate Mr. Luce, an American citizen standing up for his rights. Additionally, Chief Kellerman, under the username Bill O'Reilly, pardon me. I get all choked up when I hear Bill O'Reilly. Additionally, Chief Kellerman, under the username Bill O'Reilly, posted a number of inflammatory and harassing comments on the website of a local newspaper, the La Crosse Tribune, including 7 comments on the article regarding the filing of the initial lawsuit. Within the comments, Chief Kellerman posted that Luce had disrespected the wrong mofo, as well as posting false comments about Mr. Luce wetting himself and posting Luce's home address. Seems that the wrong mofo, Chief Kellerman, graduated from the Barney Fife School of Law Enforcement. After initially denying any involvement in the harassment of Luce, the chief ultimately admitted the harassment as an attempt to get back at Luce, after detectives told him they had traced the unwanted solicitation to his IP address at the police department and his home. Detectives had referred their investigation to the Monroe County District Attorney for criminal prosecution under Wisconsin law. Chief Kellerman appears to be well versed in Saul Alinsky's tactic of personal destruction of the opposition, something perfected by current liberal progressive socialists who have carefully studied his rules for radicals. Persecution by government officials via coercion and intimidation has no place in our constitutional republic. Hat tip to TMLC for taking up this case, and I certainly hope Chief Timothy Kellerman is sent away for a nice taxpayer-funded incarceration for violating the public trust and for dishonoring his oath to serve and protect the people. Government coercion. Is that what the ordinance here in Pocatello does? Well, yes, it does. It's more than coercion. It is trampling on your personal liberties and rights by forcing you to accept something that most of you didn't find acceptable. And please, I can hear the screaming and hollering from the LGBTQ. No, you guys were beat. We win. The ordinance stays. Well, that's true. The LGBTQ were able to, with the help of multi-million-dollar organizations, with the expenditure of about $100,000, not exactly bang for your buck kind of thing, they were able to coerce this town to misinform, confuse, however you want to, the people of this city into voting no, to leave the ordinance in place. We still believe that there may be some, well, we have misgivings about the turn of events and how it turned out. But let's get back to the subject at hand. What we're talking about is your free speech, your free rights, and how they are affected by the so-called non-discrimination ordinance here in Pocatello. Now, I would like to remind you, or maybe just inform you if you didn't already know, that non-discrimination ordinances have been in place in many cities and across the country for some time. Do you remember Brunel Stutzman in Washington, the flower, I think she had the flower shop, and she was brutalized by the state, actually. The homosexual couple for whom she demurred to make a flower arrangement ultimately said, no, don't worry about it, we'll get our flowers elsewhere, which they did. And then the state decided that they had to punish her, not correct or redress a wrong. They needed to punish Ms. Stutzman. That law that they went after her for had been in place for about 6 years. It was, in fact, a non-discrimination ordinance, not unlike ours. Ours hasn't been tested yet, and it may not be tested for a year, 2 years, maybe only a few weeks, who knows. I think it may be worth pointing out, though, when we're talking about the non-discrimination ordinance, as it always refers to the LGBT, and I keep adding the Q because depending on who you're talking to, there is the Q in there for queer. The LGBTQ community, the only segment of that community really that is visible, if that's the term, are the so-called transgenders. And there are very few women transgendering to men in that community, at least very few visibly like that. Now, you and I have both seen females that are very butch and are working very hard to not look like girls. We've seen that. There are some in this community. I seriously doubt any of them has ever been refused service anywhere. I seriously doubt that any of them has ever been brutalized or anything else because there is no empirical data to show that. But they can remain invisible. The LGBTQ can remain invisible as long as they want to. The thing is, they've decided they don't want to be invisible. They want you to give your approbation and your respect, whether you like it or not, to their lifestyle. Now, there are some in the LGBTQ who don't want to be visible, and unfortunately, some of their LGBTQ brethren and sisterin have decided to out them anyway, and that's unfortunate. If a person has this lifestyle and they want to keep it to themselves, that should be their prerogative. There are some in the community that don't like that, and so those LGBTQs that don't like that have outed a few people that would have preferred to stay in the shadows and live their lives quietly. That being said, I believe that the reason this even came about is mainly to force you to accept the male who comes into wherever or is in any place posing as a female and to make you accept it. And I'm not talking about his psychological point of view and he feels like a girl, he feels like a woman. Well, if he really feels that way, there are surgical procedures to make that a more complete solution. A lot of us have a hard time accepting having somebody teaching our children that it's okay or trying to force us to accept it. If a transgender male comes into your business, are you going to notice it? Unless he's an extraordinarily good makeup artist or costumer, you're probably going to notice. Very few will go unnoticed. There are certain anatomical features that differ between men and women that are very difficult to hide or to change. They can be. I have seen males who are quote-unquote transgender who, until they are inspected anatomically, you honestly would not know the difference on a casual look. That's true. But if a person comes into your place of a business and orders a hamburger or whatever your business is, and he obviously looks pretty male in that female garb, are you going to look? Yeah, probably. It is a curiosity to most of us, just like the people you see tattooed with, covered with tattoos. That's a curiosity to many of us. Does that mean that you wish them malice or evil? No, but they're going to make sure, just in case, the LGBTQ are going to make sure that you accede to their lifestyle one way or another. Hence the ordinance. Now, we gave you a little timeline last week. How did this come about? And as I explained to you that it started several years ago when the Human Relations Committee here in town, who was at that time chaired by Susan Matsura, and I don't know if she's still on that committee or not. They decided, and I'm assuming this is just something I'm concluding by things I've read. Susan Matsura decided that the LGBT community needed protection. From what? We don't know, because there had been no problem, nothing other than one event that was questionable. There had been nothing going on in this city. The LGBTQ were who they are, doing what they do. And there had been no civil problems or anything else going on. They weren't as out there, perhaps, as they are now that they've decided to come forth, but there were no problems here. And certainly, this is not a civil rights issue like the color of a man's skin. This is a personal identification. A black man, a yellow man, red man, brown man, however, a white man cannot change the color of their skin to be something else. It's something you are going to look at. When you see me, you can see I'm a white male, an old white male. I can't change that. My civil rights are a different thing. So a person who is portraying themselves as the LGBT can hide that if they want to, unlike the black man who cannot hide. The black man has civil rights, and now the LGBT are trying to equate their sexual orientation with civil rights. It's not the same. You know that, and I know that. But we do now have this ordinance to force us to accept it one way or another. Now, I had brought you up to April of last year, a little more than a year ago, and we continue forth with April 18th, 2013, at a city council meeting, and agenda item number 20 started talking about modifications to the proposed non-discrimination ordinance. Now, remember, originally this was not an ordinance or a proposed ordinance. Originally, it was a resolution that was changed to become an ordinance because a resolution does not have teeth in it, and an ordinance can bite you. And that's what the people who are pushing this wanted. They wanted to bite you. They wanted your attention to such a degree that they were willing to get this thing pushed through. One of the things that was discussed at some length was the having to do with mediation. As it stands now, as I've shared with you before, if you are accused of discriminating against LGBTQ people, the accusation is enough for a police report. They can go forward to the city police department, make a criminal complaint, and the police department is required to follow through on it. If you are not able to prove that you didn't discriminate, if you can't in some way demonstrate that this is a hoax, you are going to wind up before somebody in the city, a magistrate or somebody, and it will start with, first of all, you're signed up as a guest to the police department, you get a report made on you, and then you're going to go to mediation. The first $250 of the mediation will be paid by the taxpayers, you and me. The next $250 will be paid by the accused, the person who is supposed to be the bad guy here. And the next $250, if it goes that far, will be paid by the accuser. If there's no resolution, then it will go to court for a jury trial. Or it could be a bench trial. You know, if you ask the judge to make it a bench trial, you could do that, as far as I know. This is not just a ticket. If you are found guilty of discrimination, and I'm really hard-pressed to understand how you could be found guilty of it, but if through some quirk you're found guilty of discrimination, unless you're really blatantly out there, you will be punished by a fine and or a jail sentence. Either way, you will excuse me, if you're found guilty, you now have a criminal record, and that will go with you from now on. Anytime you have to fill out a document that asks if you've ever been arrested or convicted of a crime, you have to say, yes, I have been convicted of the violation of the non-discrimination ordinance of Pocatello. And then you have to explain what happened. But you still have a criminal record. Now, it seems that some on the city council didn't feel that just a talking to or a ticket would be enough. They wanted you to be punished. In fact, the person most strongest in this was, well, it's hard to decide if it was former Councilman Bray or Mr. Bybee, because Mr. Bybee, even though representing the city as a city attorney, seemed rather zealous in seeing to it that we had a criminal offense that had teeth in it. I say seemed, you know, I can't say that as a fact, but when you read the documentation, and if you were there, it seemed that Mr. Bybee really wanted this to bite you. He didn't want you just to get off with a ticket. Mr. Bybee gave an overview of potential consequential differences if a discrimination violence were reduced to an infraction instead of a criminal offense. An infraction is just a ticket. He stated that a defendant would lose their right to a jury trial and lose their right to have counsel appointed for them. In other words, he's saying, well, you know, you got to have the jury trial, and then you can have counsel. Mr. Bybee added that the ability to offer victim restitution would be lost if the offenses were changed to an infraction. In other words, well, first of all, who's the victim? The guy who said, well, I can't rent to you because, and it had nothing to do with your sexual orientation, other reasons. Which one of these is really the victim? The LGBTQ guy that says that he couldn't get a room or whatever, or the guy who says, well, I don't allow people under 55, I don't allow smokers. under Mr. Bybee's definition, he wanted the victim to be wanted victim restitution, just like the victim of a murder or something like that gets restitution. We're taking this far beyond just a civil offense. This is becoming a heavy-duty crime. A lot of discussion. Mrs. Nye had some things and went on. Susan Matsura had a chance to utilize her position as the chairman and as a person to speak out, and she spoke in favor of a modification to make this a criminal offense. She added that she is in favor of the whole ordinance and feels the proposed deletion of the line regarding mediation provisions would remove undue burden from a victim. Chad Sellers was in favor of modification, but for different reasons. He agreed that removal of the line would allow the city to remove the criminal actions. Several other people spoke. Billy Johnson, who is very out there homosexual. She doesn't make any bones about it. She doesn't go around beating her chest about it either. She just, if you ask her, she'll tell you. I don't know how that works. She's made it very evident through her writings. Billy Johnson spoke as an uncommitted on the proposed modification. She feels the decision-making process should be fair. Yeah, I guess we all do that. And another number of people. Mr. Bybee stated that constitutional issues are not easy. He reviewed the process and noted rules already in place regarding mediation work well. In place where? What rules is he talking about? Because the ordinance hadn't been passed yet. Mr. Bray suggested an amendment be added to section 9.36.30 to include the words "to willfully commit" at the beginning of the section A, B, and C. He feels the additional wording would establish intent. There's a difference between a specific intent and other crimes. A specific intent crime is something like murder. You had a specific intent to kill that person in a fashion that is unlawful, to commit an unlawful homicide. He wants to make this ordinance basically the equivalent of a murder or a rape, a specific intent crime. Good old Steve Brown. Steve Brown is always good for a little politicking and a little, there's a lot of FaceTime here and you don't want to lose that. Mr. Brown stated that he has sought the advice from attorneys, civic leaders, religious leaders, and respected individuals regarding the proposed ordinance. He respects the opinions that have been shared and feels the decision to enact an ordinance has been a difficult one. And you can just see him wringing his hands. Mr. Brown feels it is unfortunate that discrimination occurs, and it is important to find an effective balance on all issues. Okay. Glad you got your FaceTime there, Steve. Okay. Mr. Moore stated that when the council is faced with a tough issue, he often follows his heart when making a decision. He has friends and knows individuals who run local businesses that could be negatively impacted or affected by this ordinance. Mr. Moore feels they will not be affected, as these individuals will not discriminate against others. Huh? A little more FaceTime, I guess. Mr. Bray believes that because specific protections have been added regarding religion and other issues, the ordinance meets everyone's needs. Well, not exactly. And so many people got a chance to speak. Eventually, there was a vote. Mrs. Nye's motion was voted upon this time, and at the roll call, the voting was Nye, Bray, and Brown. Cooper, Johnston, and Moore were all in favor of making modifications. Council were asked to consider an ordinance enacting a new section to Pocatello Municipal Code Title IX, Chapter 16, to prohibit discriminatory acts in housing, employment, and public accommodations upon sexual orientation and gender identity expression. Now, up until this point, they were just talking about whether they were going to have the ordinance, how it was going to be put together, and all that. Motion was made by Mrs. Nye, seconded by Moore, and we come to a split vote. And the mayor asked, shall the ordinance pass? Voting in favor were Bray, Moore, and Nye. Those voting in opposition were Brown, Cooper, and Johnston. Mayor Bladd voted in opposition to the motion. The motion failed. The mayor called for a study session on May 9th and the ordinance be considered by the council at a regular city council approved meeting. All right, let's see if we got some time here. So we march forward to May 9th, and we're talking about the same thing. And this was a study session. And a study session is just what it says. They're studying, but it is open to the public. You can watch it. You can and keep in mind that before this ordinance came up, there had been no cases of any documented discrimination in Pocatello. Pardon me. There was one accusation that had been made, and as I understand it, two homosexual men. Now, the story in the paper was different from the real story, and you need to understand there was a difference because it appears to me that the paper was trying to mold an opinion that you could agree with, and maybe get some sympathy. According to the newspaper, two homosexual men were walking home from Charlie's, walking hand in hand, when out of the blue they were jumped by a guy to beat the snot out of one of them, and the other one ran away or something like that. And this was in the wee hours of the night, early hours of the morning, something like that. Well, truth is not always the same as fiction. The fiction is that these two men, homosexuals, are walking down the street, minding their own business, holding hands, and somebody was offended and beat the snot out of them. The truth is a little more direct. It turns out that these two men were walking hand in hand down the middle of a street, and a guy had his car in the street, didn't want to have two people in the middle of the street, honked at them. These guys flipped him off, and the guy took umbrage. Now, I don't know if they were coming home drunk and he was coming home drunk, don't know. But apparently this guy decided that he wasn't going to take it, got out of the car and did pummel one of these guys. It was a provocation. This was not just a random guy jumped out and beat up a guy holding hands with another guy. There was a little more to it, including provocation. The case eventually went from our police department, I'm told, to the FBI. The FBI concluded that there was a far different story from the one that was portrayed by good old Idaho State State Journal. All right. So anyway, and it did not fall under hate crime. It was a crime of provocation by a couple simpletons flipping off another simpleton. All right. So we go on. The words willfully committed were added to the discriminatory act. An individual stating they did not intend to discriminate will not invalidate the action. So if you're accused of doing this and you say, "But I didn't do it. Here's what really happened." Too bad. You're still going to have to answer for it. It was noticed that people will retain their First Amendment rights. Well, this is not necessarily true. By enacting this ordinance, they have trumped your individual rights, and they have given a certain group of people who identify sexually, their orientation sexually, as being their personal identity. They've given them additional rights over yours and mine, and they can make these accusations. Gender identity contained on any person's state-issued driver's license or identification card shall determine the bathroom, locker room, or like facilities that are to be used by any person. And this came up when they were trying to figure out, well, how do you protect a person that, a guy's in drag and he wants to use a ladies' room? How does he prove that he's a male? And of course, you can go to the DMV right now and get your license, your driver's license, to say that you're a woman. You don't have to look like one. You can say you are, and you can get that. And then there was, and then Mr. Bray made an interesting comment. It asks too much to ask about an individual's personal life, and I fear people in their juvenile attitudes will open up this section of the ordinance and make it too broad. So according to him, everybody's attitudes are juvenile, and he's making a blanket indictment of the community. Then there were some questions about getting the ACLU involved. We find out that the ACLU was involved from day one. They had a lot to say about a lot of things. Then we go to Mr. Bray. Mr. Bray passed out information from the city code regarding penalties for pawnbrokers, sexually oriented business, going out of business sales, and other misdemeanors. He's concerned the proposed ordinance is not as effective to persuade offenders to comply. He reviewed the general provisions penalty and feels all misdemeanors should carry the same weight. He wants teeth in this law. Mr. Tramner talked a little bit about the ordinance, the legal ramifications. Mr. Moore shared his concerns and feels a person who continues to violate city codes should serve jail time. So I guess if you are accused several times and, I don't know, found guilty or not ever, then whatever, they're going to make sure you go to jail. Remember, this all had to do with one person deciding that there was a problem where one didn't exist before. All right, there's a lot more, but I want to get to June 6th, 2013. And June 6th, 2013, we just passed about 5 days memorializing that infamous occasion. And this is the meeting that started at 7:22 in the evening and ended at 12:30 the next morning. 12:30 next morning, yep, right on the button. And this is where you and I got the ordinance. A lot of people talked about this in this meeting. This meeting was attended by, I don't know, a couple hundred people, most of whom were not from this community, most of whom were not even from this area, many of whom were not even from this state. They have a traveling circus that goes from town to town to bully the local communities into doing what they want, and that's what they did here. Just like they did recently in the attempt to repeal the ordinance, they had their bullies come from other states, gave them plenty of money, got them on the ground, and went out and basically bullied the community into keeping the ordinance, at least as far as we know. A lot of people had something to say about that. For instance, Elliot Redvin stated that he is a transgender individual and is in support of the proposed ordinance. He feels a transgender individual should use restroom facilities most suited to their identity. Their perception, too bad about yours. Christine Kirsch from Meridian is a licensed counselor who offers support and education to transgender clients throughout the Idaho and is in support of the proposed ordinance. She feels uncomfortable with the section relating to bathroom identifications. That's where they wanted you to be able to prove that you were whatever gender. Now, why do we have this person from Meridian talking about the thing in our city? Here's one from Garden City. Garden City, Emily Jackson spoke in favor of the proposed ordinance. She is a transgender individual and feels the amendment regarding bathroom identification is unnecessary and an invasion of privacy. Whose privacy? What are we talking about here? Jan Nish lives on North Arthur, spoke in favor of the proposed ordinance, believes the changes to the ordinance have improved the ordinance. She feels the small business exemption is not necessary. This is where they were going to, originally it was going to be this ordinance would not apply to businesses, I think it was with 15 or fewer employees. That eventually got knocked down, I think, to 5 or fewer employees. They decided, no, if you're a one-person operation, we want you to be as liable as anybody else. And so she says that the business exemption is not necessary and the amendment regarding identification for bathroom use is degrading and both changes should be removed. Nancy Greco from South Garfield read a written statement written by Billy Johnson. The statement Ms. Greco read stated Ms. Johnson's support for the original non-discrimination ordinance. Ms. Johnson feels the statement regarding Freedom of Religion Act is unnecessary. In other words, too bad about your religious convictions. And it goes on. I have, there's no way in the world I can read all of this. There's 21 pages of stuff here. We can't cover it all. There's just too much. You can get it, and I would suggest you do that. You can go online and you can read these minutes, and you should. You should educate yourself as to what happened. How did it happen? Is it going to come up again? Well, sooner or later, there's something going to come up. Matter of fact, I have a couple of clips to show you that we may have shown this before, but I want you to remember it's important that you visualize how what the effect of this law can and will be upon you and us in this community. Josh, are we wound up on that disc? Are we good to go on that disc, Josh? Okay. Oh, he's getting Paul Gregerson ready in the other place, so he can't hear me. We have a couple of things that when we get him back in the booth, I want to show you. But I want to remind you. I hope you read. There's so many things that we need to cover here that we can't, and we're just about gone as far as we can on this issue because, well, we have tried. Tomorrow, I expect that we're going to have a press release. The Vote Yes Pocatello people are going to have a press release that we will release to the newspaper and to channels 6 and 8, and we're going to talk about what has been happening as far as Vote Yes Pocatello trying to get a recount on the ballot issue. I think you will be somewhat astonished at the machinations of our county, and it hasn't gone. I can't go any further than that at the moment, but I think when I tell you what's been happening, you're going to really be sadly surprised that this can happen in our community. Let me see if we've got, Josh, are you back in the booth there? Okay, are we ready to go on that first one? Okay, let's take a look at Elaine Photography.
Christian wedding photographer, and her decision to refuse a job at a same-sex ceremony because of her faith. Elaine Huguenin and her husband say accepting the job would have been in conflict with their rights to practice their religion. But after the New Mexico Supreme Court ruled that their decision amounted to a case of discrimination, sounds like they've decided to take the fight even higher. Jordan Lawrence is senior counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom and is representing the Huguenins in this case. Jordan, good to see you today.
Shannon, good to be here. Appreciate all your work reporting at the Supreme Court.
Well, and this case may end up there. Let's start, though, with
right.
what you got from the New Mexico Supreme Court. Basically said in the opinions and concurrences, one of the bottom lines was, this is the price of citizenship. You have a right to practice your religion, but when it discriminates against someone else, it's the price of being a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, the price of citizenship does not mean giving up your constitutional rights. It is shocking to think that an artist or any American can be forced by the government to promote messages that they don't agree with. And it raises the question after a decision like this, do we as Americans have the right to live free of this kind of government restraint and coercion?
Well, and I want to read another part of this because so many parts of the opinion raise a lot of questions. The concurring judge in writing, Richard Boston, I believe is the justice here, he said that the Huguenins, the couple here, have to channel their conduct, not their beliefs, so as to leave space for other Americans who believe something different. What about the Huguenins?
Well, that's exactly right. In a free society, people of different beliefs have to learn how to get along. There were plenty of photographers available willing to shoot this a same-sex ceremony. They got them. The Huguenins just need to be excused. This can't be used in an authoritarian, coercive way to force people to basically promote the messages that they don't agree with.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I know at the lower court level, at least at one point, the Huguenins not only were found that they violated this human rights law in New Mexico, but also ordered to pay nearly $7,000 in attorney's fees to the couple who took them to court.
That is correct. And even though they were able to get photographs of their wedding that they were very satisfied with, they still wanted to send a message and make an example of Elaine Photography and John and Elaine Huguenin.
Okay, so the bigger question here, you mentioned they found another photographer for their ceremony.
Yes.
There were plenty of others who are happy to photograph any ceremony, any situation.
Right.
But this couple has very specific objections because of their very deeply held personal beliefs. Do you think that there is a political move afoot here? Because this couple was very happy to find another photographer who did photographs I understand that they like. I know in New Mexico there is a big push on several fronts to have gay marriage legalized there. And that's something the voters or the lawmakers there will have to decide. But do you think that this particular case is not just about the photography, but it's about the bigger political goals?
Well, I think that it is. And I think throughout U.S. history, we have seen those in power, those promoting a prevailing orthodoxy, tend to want to silence those that disagree with them. And that's why the founders put the First Amendment in, to prevent the government from trying to silence or muzzle those that disagree with their opinions. And this is, to me, a clear overreach of government power. The New Mexico Supreme Court got it wrong, and that's why we're seriously considering taking this up to the U.S. Supreme Court.
All right, I want to read another bit of the concurring opinion here. It said, but when actions, even religiously inspired, conflict with other constitutionally protected rights, there must be some accommodation. What is the constitutionally protected right here? Because she wasn't performing weddings. She wasn't, which is not legal in New Mexico anyway. I mean, she was asked to photograph a commitment ceremony. Is it the constitutional right to photographs? I seriously am confused by what the judge is referencing there.
Well, I'm not exactly sure either. That, I mean, generally people, and I understand that there's public accommodation laws so that people can do business without being discriminated against. But these laws cannot be used in a way that force people to advocate ideas that they disagree with. There's certain professions that are different than a restaurant or a hotel that basically promote messages, a videographer, a speechwriter, a photographer, and to force them to say, you have to do things and promote messages with your skills that you disagree with. I think that's a right that's all Americans are protected by. And those who object or support this decision and object to what Elaine Photography did must realize that there will be a day where they will find themselves in the same seat as Elaine Photography saying, I in good conscience cannot participate in this event. And there will be no constitutional protection unless the United States Supreme Court comes in and reverses this decision.
All right. Well, if you decide to take it there, let us know. We'll see you there. Jordan, thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, there you have it. We have several more, but I took up a lot of time talking to you about the ordinance, and you know the ordinance is there. I'm going to suggest, I've suggested several times reading materials for you. You can't educate yourself enough, and on any issue. I don't care if you're studying the atomic bomb, whatever. If you're interested or if you have an interest there, you need to educate yourself. This is one that you definitely need, especially in a city like ours where we have so many people of faith who are in a position now because of the ordinance. You could be affected by it. This is a book called When the Wicked Sees a City. When the Wicked Sees a City. It was written by Pastor Chuck and Donna McElhaney, and it has to do with a Presbyterian minister in San Francisco. And he was his outreach attempts to the LGBT community and what he went through, how he suffered for Christ, and he suffered for his religious convictions. Just because he's a minister didn't save him or protect him from the evils that prevail in that city. And it shows that it could happen to anybody. It could happen to you, me, or as it did to this minister. When the Wicked Sees a City. Look it up on the internet, buy it for a penny, and pay for the postage, and educate yourself as to how vicious this movement can be. I've told you about the homosexualization of America. You have to read it. You need to read this. You need to know what this ordinance is. Just a foot in the door. This is one of many that are coming down the pike. After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. The book is a little dated, but is just as cogent today as it was then, or just as contemporary as it was then. After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 1990s. Well, next week we will probably give you a wrap-up on what has happened with the attempt for a recount. Many people in this community have asked that we have a recount. Many people have not demanded it, but have said we need to. It was too close. There's something wrong, and we think that Vote Yes Pocatello. And go to voteyespocatello.com. Take a look at the information there. See what the organization has to say. I think you will quickly realize, and go to Stand Up Pocatello. You will quickly realize who the real victims are, and it's certainly not the LGBT community. In the meanwhile, have a good, safe week. I hope you have a good weekend coming up, good weather. Be safe. Remember that our freedoms don't come lightly. Somebody has paid for them. God bless you and yours. Please tune in again next Wednesday, 8:30. See you then. Thank you for tuning in.